that the party may be on the verge of collapse due to the implementation of the step-aside resolution. The party's highest decision-making body may also add more charges of ill discipline against the embattled and suspended Secretary-General Ace Magashule. Meanwhile, the party has warned that those leaking its internal discussions to the media could be found guilty of misconduct. Party spokesperson Pule Mabe says in a statement that there was a growing tendency to leak discussions of the party to the media. The ANC was holding its National Executive Committee virtual meeting, and several discussions, including audio recordings, had been leaked to the media. All right, let's get the latest then. Let's catch up with our senior reporter, then political reporter, that is Samkele Maseko. A very good afternoon to you, Samkele. No doubt you have been on the ground for us, taking note of what's happening throughout as the ANC NEC meeting has been going underway. First of all, let's talk to the issue of the leaks. What is happening there? We've heard the spokesperson Pule Mabe saying that anyone found guilty or found to be leaking information to the media will be found guilty of misconduct. This is certainly not new, this leaking of audio or information from the party, but it seems this time they're really putting their foot down on it. What can you tell us?
Essentially, Flo, what is happening is that in the NEC, they've come down hard on those whom they say are leaking information what's coming from the NEC and recording the discussions that are taking place. You did hear the leaking of the audio, a snippet of it, of what former President Mbeki was summarizing views of Batabile Dlamini, the Women's League President, summarizing views of Meho Matuba, the Women's League Secretary-General, Tony Yengeni, an NEC member as well, Dakota. So essentially the ANC is saying they're going to count down like a ton of bricks on those who are leaking these things. But you just have to go back to the last virtual meeting where Enoch Kodongwa, an ANC NEC member, had failed to mute his laptop or his device and was heard communicating the discussions of the NEC to an outside person on the telephone. The same happened to Tony Yengeni as well. He was chucked out after he had failed to mute and was communicating discussions within the NEC to outside individuals who are not NEC members. And no disciplinary proceedings have been instituted against those two particular individuals. So the ANC is just issuing out a statement and not being practically serious when it comes to dealing with those whom they say are leaking information. For us as journalists, that is the icing on top of the cake when we get these audio recordings of the NEC sessions. In fact, as we speak now, I'm listening to some of the inputs of the NEC meeting of today by Fikile Mbalula and Nomvula Mokonyane speaking about the importance of the ANC holding a National General Council, and that should happen before the ANC goes to the elections and goes into the following year, where they go to their conference next year. And also you've had Sihlezi Galala, who's been complaining in the NEC that he's not been given an opportunity to talk since he was on the talkers list from Saturday. We just waiting for Mbalula to finish so that the next point can be Senzo Mchunu, an ANC NEC member. But essentially, the ANC has, one may say, has reached a cul-de-sac when it comes to these particular issues. Most of these issues that are being deliberated upon, where the ANC finds itself with some NEC members saying it's on the verge of collapse. One of our senior colleagues at the SABC was saying that the ANC needs to go back to that 52nd National Conference in Polokwane, where they failed and refused to deliberate on the political report of former President Thabo Mbeki, whom today was summarizing the views of NEC members who are feeling as if the organization is on the verge of collapse. That should be Batabile Dlamini, Meho Matuba. You saw that Women's League SG saying that they will not be involved in battles of men in the ANC who don't have the interest of the liberation movement at heart, and saying that they will also not be supporting the Secretary-General, but they humbly request him to humble himself to ANC organizational processes.
Yeah. Samkele, I mean, speaking of the issue of collapse, I'll pretend that the issue of leaking is a side issue, but let's talk to the bigger issue of really what's taking place within the ANC NEC, and the fact that you've said the word collapse is something that, you know, a lot of people are talking about. From what you've gathered, from all the information that you have, whether it's from leaks or wherever it's coming from. Is there part of it that does point to perhaps there being a possibility of a collapse? It's not the first time we've heard of a possibility of the ANC collapsing, and certainly it's still standing. And I wonder how much the step aside issue has really sort of impacted this time around. Certainly we've been talking quite a lot about the issue of step aside, haven't we?
We firstly have to characterize and debate this issue of collapse. What does collapse mean?
Yeah.
For instance, if you look at the ANC, many people said the ANC would collapse after the 52nd National Conference. What you had a split of cope. You had the ANC losing at about 30 seats to the Congress of the People. The ANC was able to still regain enough power to govern the country, still have majority seats in the National Assembly, despite they, in every other election, losing electoral support. In this instance, many people had predicted that the ANC would again collapse and would split at the 54th National Conference. That did not happen. Also, the collapse of the ANC, we need to differentiate here. The African National Congress is not the National Executive Committee of the party. You still have lower structures. You still have provincial executive committees, which are largely intact. You still have regional executive committees, which are largely intact. You still have zonal leadership, which is largely intact. And you still have branches that are largely intact. And the organization is not the structures that lead it, but it is the people on the ground. You look at the electoral support that the governing party still gets. You go to more recent by-elections and how they were able to overwhelmingly win those by-elections across the various provinces in the country. There are new by-elections coming up now. You look at how they were able to wrestle some wards away from the Democratic Alliance, from the Inkatha Freedom Party as well, and how they are just able to continuously win those wards that they've previously had. As an organization, electorally, they are still substantively strong, but internally, they are very weak. You look at the performance of the SGO of the African National Congress and you compare it to yesteryear when people like the late Alfred Nzo were the Secretary-General of the African National Congress, when the late young Dumanokwe, who's the youngest Secretary-General of the ANC in history, was still the SGO of the governing party. You look at how strong the Secretary-General's office used to be of the African National Congress. You look at how the ANC, which was led, many ANC leaders say that the person who led the ANC through one of its most difficult periods was Oliver Reginald Tambo, how he was able to keep the ANC united and keep it together, off it from not collapsing. You look at the recent inputs that the former president of the ANC, Thabo Mbeki, made at this NEC meeting when he went to how the ANC leaders, whom the 8 of them were then expelled after a 5-year engagement within the governing party, which ultimately led to their expulsion from the governing party. So the ANC from time to time, in different epochs, has had different issues that have faced the governing party, that have faced a similar situation of collapsing the governing party, but they have always come out on top. For instance, you look at the battle that was there between former President Zuma and the then President of the African National Congress, Thabo Mbeki, going towards the 52nd National Conference of the ANC. You look at the National General Council, which was held in 2005 at the University of Pretoria. So they are able from time to time to self-correct from these issues. But post-1991, when the ANC gained power, the dynamics have changed. It's no longer about fighting for positions of power within the governing party. It's now also about access to resources. If you were to go back to the interview we had with the Secretary-General of the ANC and how he literally says that nobody will take the ANC away from me, even though it's a voluntary organization, the mere fact that ANC leaders can perceive the organization as their personal prized jewel. And you can't only apportion that to Ace Magashule, you can also apportion it to the veterans of the African National Congress who feel as if they've got ownership of this particular governing party. You go to the other former leaders of the African National Congress who form and think that they are the ANCs. These issues are substantively quantified by Chupuma Tabata, the provincial chairperson of the ANC in Limpopo, when he says that there are 3 different groupings currently in the NEC and in the ANC who all act as if they are representing the interest of the African National Congress. Yet ANC leaders today hate one another and can no longer call one another comrades. And you just oppose that to how tight is, despite they were having their issues during the liberation struggle, but they were able to mend whatever differences they had and unite. For instance, you go out to ANC leaders speak about the watershed Morogoro conference of the African National Congress and the Chris Hani memorandum, which spoke about the ills that were happening in the Umkhonto we Sizwe camps in exile.
Samkele, let me just come in here. We have to wrap up our conversation. Let's just, in closing, talk to me, please, about when we can expect the sort of outcome of the meeting. I think you sort of touched on it briefly, but before I let you go, can you just give us some clarity? There's never really a confirmed time, and it's never as it is. But what can you tell us in terms of what we can expect roundabout?
These issues, Flo, are just hurry up and wait. You never know the time. The NEC members are still deliberating on the ANC's election plan going towards this year's local government elections and trying to win lost ground in metros that no longer govern, Nelson Mandela Bay, Tshwane and Johannesburg, which is led through a coalition of various parties, which is currently governed by the ANC. So essentially, that's the main thrust today. But you've also got other NEC members. I know that Nomvula Mokonyane raised the issue of respect and the issue of the National General Council of the African National Congress in this particular meeting. I know Sihlezi Galala has been dying to speak in this meeting, and I know Senzo Mchunu will also be speaking on the roadmap of the ANC towards these elections, and Fikile Mbalula saying that by June the ANC must have a well-oiled election plan that is starting to be rolled out across the country should the country not go to a higher level within the lockdown. But there have also been issues of international relations being spoken about in this National Executive Committee, which I assume our colleague Sophie Mokoena, head of the foreign desk, will also touch on those issues, particularly with mounting calls for South Africa's borders to be tightened as a threat of a new wave looms, and the new variant of the coronavirus, which was first detected in India, which is causing havoc within that particular country, now having about 3 or 4 cases of that variant now found in South Africa, between Gauteng, the economic hub of the country, with a high dense population of people, and also in KwaZulu-Natal, which also has one of the highest dense population of citizens within the country living within these 2 provinces.
All right, Samkele, always a pleasure as always. Thank you so very much. We'll catch up with you later, I'm sure.
Indeed.
All right, that is Samkele Maseko, their senior political reporter there. He's, of course, on the ground for us as the ANC NEC meeting is underway, and we'll certainly be bringing you the outcomes of that meeting. Let's continue then on the same conversation, on the same topic. Let's bring in leadership expert, Dr. Majola. It's always a pleasure to hear you, Dr. Majola. Thank you for availing yourself to SABC News as always.
Thank you very much, Flo, and good afternoon to SABC viewers. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, Dr. Majola, we've certainly, you and I had quite a few discussions relating to the step-aside issue. No doubt it has now grown and become an even bigger issue than when we initially started to talk about it. Talk to me about your assessment of what's currently happening right now when it comes to this big issue of step-aside. No doubt we did point out the fact that this would be problematic. You mentioned it before, and of course now it's clear that it is. It's causing quite a bit of an issue within the party. Talk to us about your assessment and what you think of what's currently taking place within the party.
Well, the question is the ANC in crisis? The answer will be yes, of course. The ANC is in crisis, but it's a necessary crisis. It's a good crisis. Different organizations go through different stages in time, and it's something that they could not have avoided or prevented. It's a good crisis for the organization. The question is, how are they going to respond to this crisis, and how are they going to make out of this crisis? Because I mean, like Winston Churchill said years ago, he said, as a great leader, you must never allow a good crisis go to waste. So the ANC must never allow this crisis to go to waste. As long as this crisis will translate to rebirth, to renewal, to reforms, to transformation in the organization, it's a good thing. And really, ANC and the leadership in particular, they must be commended for their decisiveness, because we've always been saying this step aside thing, they failed to take tough decisions. incorrect decisions. They've been talking and talking, but at least finally and eventually they have taken decisions. So they must be commended for that.
Yeah, Dr. Magashule, you talk about renewal of the party, and you quote Winston Churchill that they shouldn't let a good crisis go. But what about if the opposite were to happen? I mean, what if this is not a renewal? And I'm sure you heard bits and pieces of my conversation with my colleague Samkele. What if this is about actual collapse? I mean, a lot of people are talking about whether or not this could be, the beginning of the end. And I wonder what you make of that.
That will point out to leadership. It will mean it's a poor leadership and it's a bad leadership, because great leaders are like eagles. Great leaders love crisis. They love chaos, uncertainties, because that is why they rise to the occasion. Because remember that during crisis, that is when great leaders are tested. Actually, difficult times separate effective leaders from weak leaders. So if whatever reason it can go sour, it will mean that the leadership failed to use this crisis to its advantage, because it's a good thing for as I'm saying, for cleanup. If ANC has to go through this pain in order for it to be resuscitated and rejuvenated, so be it. It is good for the organization. But the question is, it would always point back to the leadership. How is the leaders are going to respond to this? How are they going to handle themselves, handle the situation? Because remember, it's not only about decisions. It's not only about decisiveness. Yes, great leaders must be decisive. But if they take wrong decisions, then the organization will go down. So decisions have the potential of two things. It's either it will make you as a leader or break you as a leader. And decisions can make an organization or break an organization. So it just depends what kind of decisions are they making now, or how are they responding to this good crisis that is facing them.
It certainly will be something for us to keep watching, and certainly interesting for us to see. Thank you, as always, for giving us your time, Dr. Magashule. Much appreciated, sir.
Thank you.
All right, that's leadership expert Dr. Magashule, regular political analyst for us here on SABC News. We're going to take a short break. Do stay with us. More news after this.